And we're always talking about relationships, and you got to have relationships in life, and one is your doctor, and one is your dentist, and one is your barber. I mean, I love my barber. I go see him every 6 weeks.
Not me.
You know? Oh, that's true. You don't get to see a barber.
I know.
Well, for those of us who have hair, we go see a barber. And your auto mechanic is a guy that you got to have a relationship with. And I had an experience where, we rebuilt this lady's transmission, and everything was going well, and she came in one day. And she came walking in the door, and there was a tow truck in front of my window. It was backing up. Dee, 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 dee. This lady walked in, and she said, "Man, I spent $3,200 with you people, and my car is bad." And she read me the riot act.
She ripped you.
She ripped me upside down and sideways. And we know in the business to not take it personal. We try.
It's hard.
It's hard not to,
when
right?
Our name is on the building. We're proud of what we do. And nobody wants to be told we've done something wrong, even though it does happen.
So we try, and we just kind of hold it, let it happen, find out what happened, see what. So I walk in the back, and she just read me the riot act, and I asked the technician. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "It's out of gas." So we proceeded to fill it up with gas because she is a good customer, and we understand people get upset over these things, but we went ahead and washed the car, and I took her keys, and she said, "What was wrong with it?" I said, "You were out of gas."
Did she fold into this?
Oh, man, did she want to just shrink up into nothing and walk out of there? But this happens a lot in auto repair. There is issues when it comes to auto repair, and it's not easy. People assume auto repair is just easy.
And the point of that conversation is not to tease or make fun of this woman who had a problem. She really thought, maybe she was busy, had a bad day that day, or whatever. But the purpose of this is, how do you act, or how do you treat people? What do you do when things go wrong? How do we line up the rest of this encounter or this transaction to make it good for everybody?
Well, I'm going to fault our business for the way we've advertised for the last decade, 10, 15 years. In the advertising, the tagline is, "We get it right the first time." And, we all want to get it right the first time. We try our hardest. But the reality is that we get it right the first time 95% of the time, because there's parts failures. There's a mechanic. There's a human error factor. So it does happen, and not to just come unglued because there's an issue with your car.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Don't take that literal. The message is, we do a good job. We're proud of our work, and we do fix cars right. But again, you can't do it right every time, on time, right every single time. You're going to have. There's just some repairs that are maybe more prone to a comeback, what we would call it a return repair or a comeback.
Well, AC repair is the first one that comes to my mind. People go in for an AC service, and what they do is they'll go ahead and look for any visible or obvious leaks. They may evacuate the system. It may pull a good vacuum, and there's no leaks present. They'll go ahead and dye it and recharge it. That's not a guarantee that you're not going to be back in 2 weeks.
And that's not even really repair. That's a service to find out
right
what the repair is. But again, it all goes back to the communication. We as the shop service manager or technician, have to communicate of what we're doing, and at the same time the customer has to understand that, and not just hear it, but really understand it.
Well, the other repair that I think too is oil leaks. Let's just say you've got a car with 100,000 miles. It's going to be leaking, I'll pick the valve cover, which is up on top of the engine. Well, when it leaks from the valve cover, it leaks down the rest of the engine. So you're going to start with what's up top. We're going to start with the valve covers. We're going to that's obviously leaking. We're going to wash everything down real good, and then we're going to see the next oil change. We're going to see what's leaking. So you get back, and if you see a drop in your driveway, the instant reaction is to get mad because I just spent a bunch of money. What do you mean I got a leak? And that's not necessarily, we did it's maybe a 2 or 3 step process to get the oil leaks taken care of.
Again, communication. Hey, we cleaned the car off. We started at the logical, most obvious leak. My example, I like the medical examples in automotive, but if you go to the ER with a with
massive head wound,
with a massive head wound because you fell down, they're probably not going to see that scrape on your knee because it's still covered in blood, and you wouldn't want to get upset that they didn't band-aid that one or notice that, because it just wasn't likely to be seen. In that case, it's a lot less important, but also not likely to be very easily detectable.
Well, in our business, we call them comebacks. Anytime the customer has to come back. And we actually, at Tri-City, we keep track of comebacks. And when a comeback happens, it goes one of 2 ways. Our fault, our bad, we own it. Or, customer issue.
Well, and I put it down. I kind of have some notes here. Three different. We have the human portion. We just made the wrong repair. We just missed it. Whatever.
So that's a misdiagnosis.
Or made a mistake. We didn't. And we're talking about a comeback. Could be just we didn't put the lube sticker on the window to tell you when you need your next oil change, or we didn't reset the light. To me, that's a comeback. So that's just made a mistake or forgot to dot the I or cross the T. And then maybe a continuation of repair. Maybe we didn't go far enough, or it's that intermittent problem where, hey, we've got this known bad part and we have to start here.
And what's the next step? We've got a bad link in the chain. Let's replace a bad link. Let's see what comes up next.
Or we have a parts failure. And that's maybe half the time.
Let's talk about the classic check engine light comes on. You go to the shop. They do a scan for a diagnostic trouble code, and let's say it's an evaporative emissions code. And, that could set because the gas cap was left loose. So you may have the shop tell you, hey, the gas cap could have been left loose. Let's go ahead and clear the code, and if it comes back, then we need to dig into it further.
Yeah, or then you have the one you do $100 of the testing, and then people get upset that it was $100 for a $19 gas cap or $22 gas cap. So again, there's that balance. We want to try. I think we also put undue pressure on ourselves. Let's get every car done today. Let's get it back. These people need these cars to carry on with their life, and we put pressure on ourselves. When we shouldn't, maybe we should say, hey, we know we need this car for 2 days, but we want to take care of people. That's our nature. So we step out onto the limb, I think, and create some of this stuff.
Well, we have something in our shop, and this is the point I want to make, is that there's people that come in. We have a little acronym we write on top of the piece of paper that says SNG, which stands for super nice guy or super nice gal. And we absolutely bend over backwards for those people that really go out of the way to do nice and communicate well with us. So our point is, if you're going to the auto shop, you're going to get so much more from your auto shop relationship by treating them like everyday people.
When you come in, we don't want to have that car back.
No,
we're
embarrassed.
Pride in our work.
Yeah.
We're embarrassed by it. You're typically upset, or you should be upset, but we need to understand that. But we've got to be nice. We're still in a relationship here. We can't yell and scream at each other. So when you do have that problem, I think it's important to be nice, first of all, and write down what's happening. If there's some weird problem, take some notes and make sure that we all have good information so we can communicate about what the problem is, and that will help us solve it. Don't come in yelling and screaming. Maybe you call first and you say, hey, Matt, we had this problem and I have to come back. Is there a better time when we can spend some more time together? And don't come in making a scene in front of the other customers. And we are all going to be much happier when this is all finished. The process that will work itself out much better when everybody's smiling.
And you may get the SNG acronym on top of your paper.
Yeah. What's the other? Well, never.
We're kind of weird that way. We have these little things that we do. So we've got Don, Jim, and Rick. We've got a couple of open lines at 602-277-5827, 602-277 KTR. Let's go with Jim in Sun City on a 2004 Ford Taurus. Go ahead, Jim. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Well, I will.
Actually, Dave, you got that one a little backwards. We got Jim running out of gas in Phoenix, and Don with the Taurus. We'll get right back to you in a second. So, Jim, you are up. Go for it. It's all you, Jim.
Okay, well, the thing of it is you talked about the gas, and I've done AAA for many years. And people really don't realize that they run out of gas a lot, And in the summertime, how the tank will swell and give a false reading, when it's real low.
Well, yeah, you can get that. Most of the time the gas tanks are really accurate. And I don't think there's much deviation between a summertime fuel and the wintertime fuel. You might have some with the different additives and levels of ethanol in them. There might be a different capacity of the fuel, but in the accuracy of the gauge is sometimes questionable, but it does happen more.
I have not run out of gas in probably a decade, but right to the last minute, you hear that slurping noise.
I'm the king of running out of gas. We met the other day, Dave. What did my truck say? 2 miles till empty.
But Jim does bring up a good point that you don't want to run out of gas. It's not good for your car.
Well, it's not good for the car. It's not good for being on time or convenient. And it always happens on the way to church or on the way to the soccer game or some appointment that you have to. It never happens when you're just going to Home Depot to get something that you don't need.
That's funny because we were talking before the show. You were always late. It's because you're getting gas.
All right. How about Don in Sun City?
Let's go with Don in Sun City.
With the Taurus. Don, what can we help you with on Bumper to Bumper Radio today?
I have a transmission leak. When the car sits, say, 6 months, you come back and it's leaking underneath the car, and you refill it, and it runs fine for another 6 months, no problem at all. But just leaving it sit, it leaks. Is that fluid coming out of the torque converter?
It's what we typically call, that's an AX4N or AX4S transmission that's in there. And typically what happens when vehicles sit over a long period of time is that all the transmission fluid that's in the transmission cooler, which is up in the radiator, and then in the torque converter, it drains back into the transmission.
It's because it's a higher level, so it's going to siphon down.
It's going to siphon down. And there's seals in transmissions that are designed to keep oil in, and there's seals in transmissions that are designed to keep dust out. And the higher up seals, the ones you don't normally use, those are the ones that keep dust out. And so what happens is the level comes up in the transmission, and you'll start to get leaks that wouldn't necessarily be there. So nothing really wrong with that. You could, to get scientific about it and measure what we call bleed back. And the way you would do that is after you got done running the car, you came back, you would measure the transmission fluid level and mark it on the dipstick. And then you would come back the next morning and see how much it actually went up to see if you really got a significant problem. But if a car sits for 6 months, a lot of times that's going to happen.
But it still should be checked next time you're having an oil service or next time you buy a transmission shop that you know or and trust.
Right.
Go in and see if there is there shouldn't, like if the pan gasket shouldn't be leaking.
It shouldn't be leaking regardless, and either should the lever seal or the torque converter seal. But that's more so what it is.
Yeah.
Let's go with Rick in Scottsdale on a 2000 Honda Civic. Go ahead, Rick. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yeah, hi, guys. A great show.
Thank you.
Question, I got a problem. I got a Honda Civic. It's got 100,000 miles, and I brought it to an independent 8 months ago. Engine was bad, and they said that they could take care of it. It cost me $3,000, and it's the third engine now. They gave a 90-day warranty on it, and every time 90 days or less came up, the engine went bad again. This car is sitting on their lot right now. This is the third bad engine in less than a year. Any suggestions? Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, we don't want you to name any names here on the radio, but engines should have 3-year warranty, 5-year warranty. For you to have 3 engines in 1 year, we're not fixing the problem, or we're using a sub-quality engine. I'm not sure what they're doing.
Well, one thing jumped out at me. He said $3,000. I haven't put a $3,000 engine in a car in a long time. It's almost not. It's too cheap. Sometimes the labor alone to do that job, and again, that gets back into that thing. There's a way we can put an engine in the car. Sure, we can do an engine for $3,000, but what quality of the engine and what's everything else that goes along with it. So I don't understand what's making this engine fail. What is there something going on? Are they just getting a poor quality engine? Are they really putting an engine in it?
Yeah, that may be. Quite frankly, 3 engines from the same place in a year, that's almost worthy of a complaint. And I don't think 90-day warranty is a substantial enough warranty for an engine.
Well, we've talked about it before, Dave. My opinion, any repair shop that is doing business and is worth what they're doing should have a 1-year warranty, period. That's the minimum.
Minimum, correct.
And then, Rick, I would say, why don't you follow us up with an email? Go to bumpertobumperradio.com. Send Dave and I an email. Give us some of the information. Let us know who the shop is, and maybe we can help walk through that and provide some advice for you to get a solution.
We've got Fran up next, but I wanted to hit on Rick's phone call because I hear that story a lot.
Well, we hear it, but we've seen a handful of these lately in the Better Business Bureau. Dave and I do. It's not arbitration. It's
Automotive Review Advisory Committee. And we look at these cases where, the one that I saw that was interesting that you brought up is the guy had an engine done. He paid to have the engine done, but now the engine's been done. He's got to find out why the engine went bad in the first place. And it was a cooling fan that was bad, and they said, you're going to need a cooling fan. Well, I don't have money for a cooling fan. Well, that's why the whole thing went bad in the first place. So anytime you get a repair such as an engine or a transmission, what really has to be known, we know, what failed. Okay, the engine failed or the head gasket failed, and then we've got to know why it failed. If we don't identify the source, it will fail over and over again. And on Rick's 2000 Civic, Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe there is an issue.
Well, in the why isn't necessarily, why was the molecular structure of the oil and the bearing failed and the metallurgy. We're not talking about autopsy, not, why did it blow up, so to speak. But in the case that you were talking about, Dave, it was an overheating issue is what ruined the engine the first time. So the question from the shop, and the shop should be communicating, or the consumer should be asking, okay, that's great, that fixed the engine, but what caused the engine to go bad? And there should always be a contingency, $100, $250 for that. Sometimes we see the radiator case is blown open, or that leak, we see the leak's been leaking
It's real
forever,
obvious.
or the oil's never been changed. But sometimes it just, there's something else. But the big thing that got me there is the owner of the shop let that car go. That car would not be I would pay, if you insisted on taking the car, you would have to sign that you understand that it is not fixed. And I would pay to have it towed to your first destination. You would not drive that car from my shop.
No, because you're gonna waste all that money. And sometimes we rebuild a Tri-City Transmission. We'll rebuild a transmission then to find out why it failed, and we'll put it back together, and it's got a real bad 2-3 shift.
Cause and effect, or
effect,
whatever.
and hey, 2-3 shift. We go start looking at a mass airflow sensor. We're looking at different things that'll cause this thing to have an issue. So it's not, hey, we have a bad transmission, but why?
Well, and I've heard it before many times, when Larry Harker's was in. They're over at Indian School on the west side, 35th Avenue in Indian School area. Larry Harker's Auto Repair, one of the bumper-to-bumper shops. We were talking with him, and he says there's always two things. There's what broke and what caused that thing to break. We've got to make two repairs. But then in Rick's case, too, I'm reluctant to say it, but one, if you started with a bumper-to-bumper radio shop, I can guarantee you wouldn't have any issues. But I'd be almost willing to bet a soda that if you went to Better Business Bureau and looked up the history of that repair shop that you're having these engines with, I'll buy you a big gulp if they've got anything better than a C rating.
I'll buy lunch. I'll go a step further. Maybe steak dinner.
Yeah, you're stepping it up a little bit, huh, Dave?
Well, up first this segment, let's go with Fran. It looks like she's from Phoenix in a 1999 Dodge Caravan. Go ahead, Fran. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi there. Thank you. My mileage is low. It's just under 29,000. And I have a peculiar thing that's happening. Doesn't happen all the time. And so when I've taken it to my repair shop, they don't witness it. But what it is, when you turn on your ignition, the mileage area lights up, and so do the gears area. Okay? I'm not talking about the dashboard. Just those lights when you turn on your ignition. Well, I'll be driving along, and they start flickering, those two areas. They kind of just flicker off and on, off and on, off and on. I've tried to decide if it's only when my headlights are on. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes not. It doesn't do it every day. It only does it sporadically. So when I took it in, they told me they tightened some ground wires. But he was scratching his head. He did call the dealer, and they said they weren't aware of that condition. So I'm leaving it to you guys to see if you have any thoughts.
Well, Fran, we had an email like this at bumper-to-bumperradio.com, and it was a Caravan, same situation with the flickering lights, and what it turned out to be was bad ground at the battery. So the first guy you talked to, he was probably on the right page, and I've seen it. Caravans are real sensitive to alternator issues. I know as a problem, it'll affect the transmission, but bad battery connections is a real common thing. That's the first place I go is for a good power source.
I was kind of giggling to say that's kind of like we clean the grounds up means I really don't know what it was, but that's the best place to start. It hopefully.
It is a good place to start.
Maybe we got lucky. But the other thing I was going to say is the ignition switch. If you've got a lot of keys on your ignition switch and there was on your keychain, that weighs down the key and tumbler. And on the Caravans, I believe the ignition switch and the electrical portion of the switch and the key and tumbler, it's all built together. It's big assembly, and they fall apart. So you could maybe, Fran, when that's happening, if you wiggle the key just a little bit and see if somehow you can affect that. That would be one thing. And the other advice I might give you is the shop that, based on having 29,000 miles since 1999, I bet you don't use your car a whole lot. maybe that's something where you could let the shop have it for 2 or 3 days, and they have a technician or a manager that could drive it home, and maybe they can experience the problem while they've got some test equipment hooked up to it. That's what I would do in my shop.
Let me find my notes, see if I can see what the
You just
fact or
love
fiction
that
is for the
button,
day. I
don't
do
you?
love that button. All right. And this goes back to your shopping thing. A lot of people in parking lots, and someone's going to come up to you and say, hey, my car battery is dead. Would you mind giving me a jump start? So my fact or fiction for the day comes from Peter, our engineer. I should be afraid to jumpstart someone else's car because it might damage my fuel injection system. Fact or fiction?
Well, we have a silent guest in the studio that can participate with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So, fact, I should be afraid, thumbs up, or thumbs down if you think it's okay to just jumpstart a car. This is my dad I'm talking to, by the way. What do you think? Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Fact.
It's a fact. You should be concerned.
I wouldn't be as concerned because I know what I'm doing.
Right.
I mean, I've done it once or twice, but not just jump starting the car. I mean, I understand the automotive engine and the electronics. I'm ASE master technician, so I personally wouldn't. But I've instructed my wife: you do not let anybody jump start your car, and you don't jump start anybody else's car.
Well, and why is the answer is that when you're jump starting a car, you have a very good chance of an electrical spike to the system. On your wife's BMW, there's probably 15 modules going on.
Yeah, or you can get the spike. You can just simply do it wrong. The spike would be the worst thing. And it's funny that we brought this up today. Just literally last week, or this week, we had 2 cars towed in the shop. The guy tried jump-starting his Corvette with his Mini Cooper, or vice versa, jumping the Cooper with a Corvette. They both came in on the tow truck, both with burned-up components as a result of hooking up the cables backwards. Not a good day for that guy. It ended up just being some fuse, major, the maxi fuses, the big 30-amp fuses that carry everything. But you can really cause damage. And we put a post or a link on our Facebook page. So if you go to bumpertobumperradio.com, we have instructions for jump starting if you really have to do it. But try to avoid it.
Well, and the other thing, and real quickly, I'll get into the roadside battery program. If you're
started.
Just get your car towed into a shop. If you're not the person that feels savvy about jump starting your car, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not convenient, but batteries blow up because they got hydrogen as a byproduct of what's going on there. So it does happen. We had Kurt Rock on one day. He had one blow up in his face, and that's not good. So safety goggles for sure if you're going to do it. And then there is step-by-step directions at our Facebook page right now as far as to how to go about doing it.
One thing that's not in those directions is I'll tell you, no matter what you're doing on both cars, turn on the headlights. And people say, you're crazy. That's going to draw down the battery. The headlight bulb acts as a
buffer.
As a buffer, a shock absorber, if you will, or a surge protector. So if you do get a spike, it will go into that headlight and not go into the computer, hopefully. And the other thing that we weren't even really thinking of, we heard the story of the elderly woman a couple weeks ago where the men approached her in the parking lot and said, "This thing broke off your car, but I can fix it for you. It's just going to be $3,000. That's a good deal." She got taken advantage of. There were some stories like that earlier in the year. So not just the damage to the car, you don't know who these characters are that you're around. So just play it safe on the security side and for your car.
Let's try Bill on a 2001 Chevrolet Blazer. Go ahead, Bill. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio. Matt, you got to push the button. If Bill's going to talk.
It's an honor to talk with you.
Bill, we had you cut off real quick, but sorry about that. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I got 2001 Chevy Blazer, like you said. Put a radiator in it the other day, and the transmission lines are leaking where they go into the radiator. It's not like the screw-in fitting that was in there before. It's just like a press-in clip.
Quick release type deal.
Yeah, exactly. And I pulled them apart. I cleaned everything up really good, and when I put it back together, they were still leaking. And I'm just wondering if that's a common problem.
I want to say
how I can fix it.
I wanted to say I ran into this issue here recently on a GM, and it was the fittings at the radiator. And the aftermarket radiator was different than the factory radiator, but you can buy those replacement fittings from GM. So maybe it's a matter of just changing out the fittings. In the flaring on the line may be the issue.
Yeah, you've got to make sure those are clean. Some of them have O-rings, some of them don't. And we've had problems, Dave, where when they from the factory, when they install that cooler, it's got a flared fitting, and it actually squeezes that flare out a little bit. And then we go to put it in the new radiator, it doesn't fit quite right. You've got to get some emery cloth and just knock the burr off, just clean it up a little bit. It's just that teeny little bit that makes a difference whether they seal or not seal.
Well, I would say so start out, see if you can get some new fittings. If you get some new fittings, that takes care of it. Great. If not, it may be a situation where you need some new lines or end of lines. But the funny thing about cooler lines that I say is that the transmission is only as good as its weakest link. And I don't know how often. It's probably once a week. We have a car show up on a tow truck that the cooler line blew off. And it's those quick connect fittings. A lot of times when guys are doing transmission flushes, they don't get those quite back right.
Well, but I would wonder that I have a problem with the radiator because there wasn't a leak there before. At least we don't think so. You really aren't going to make a line go bad by disconnecting it. It's got to be the connection or be looking at the go back to the drawing board at the radiator. You hate to have to pull the radiator out and all that garbage again, but sometimes I guess that's just the way it works.
Well, we'll give Peter another shot on the 95 BMW. Go ahead, Peter. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hey, guys. You know how cell phones are. I've got a 95 325i, and it's become kind of a nightmare. I gave it to the mechanic who was certified and worked out of his home, and I had a collision, so I've got a little bit of auto body work that needs to be done, plus a little bit of mechanical work that needs to be done. Well, I've paid him for parts, and he's stringing me along, and now it's gotten to the point where, I filed a small claims action against him. Now, I'm going to have to find some place to tow my vehicle. I don't know if I should find somebody who does mechanical work first or body work first or, an all-in-one type of a shop.
That's a tough, tough one. Your cell phone was cutting out. We lost a little bit about that, but you're in not a shop, a backyard, we'll call it a shade tree guy or somebody doing side jobs working on the car.
Generally, a body guy is not a good, it's a specialty.
But the question was where to start. I don't know. So you're going to have to get somebody over there to look at the car, and that's going to be the challenge. So,
how many times have you heard this story go wrong where someone's working out of their house and getting the car fixed, and they show up and they bring the parts and he installs them? It's just not good business. It may save money, but your odds of a successful repair are decreased quite a bit.
Well, Dave, classic example. There's a car that we took down to your shop last week. The lady had an engine put in, low mileage Ford Taurus, had an engine put in, and then had a problem with it. A guy in the neighborhood who has a shop who only takes cash and can't pay with credit card, which that means he's not paying his taxes or doing anything else either, and probably doesn't have the right insurance. They fix the engine. Now she has a transmission issue, and he takes the car back and says, "Sorry, we don't work on transmissions."
Well, you know why that front seal? I know which car you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know why that front seal is leaking? Because he didn't index the converter right.
Yeah.
So it's so often that we see these issues where someone installs an engine, and hey, we wanted to save a bunch of money, but the odds that the job is going to go well, they were greatly decreased.
Yeah. Hey. Before I opened my shop 18 years ago, I was doing some work in my garage.
I did too.
You get lucky once in a while, but the odds and in this case, now here you go. She paid cash to have this engine installed from a guy who has a shop in his backyard in the neighborhood. We believe that he may have caused that damage. Now what's your recourse? Because he already went back once. We always tell people, go back to the shop. You have to give them an opportunity. And she did that. But they just threw their hands in there and said, sorry, we don't do transmissions. We just put the engine in and took your $3,000, but you're on your own, lady.
Front seal leaks, converter noises, all that stuff after an engine job is pretty common.
And then the problem is he likely caused that because he didn't do the torque converter right when he had the engine out, ripped the front seal.
I'd buy steak dinner for that.
She's going to take the engine out. So now you take this, you got the job done for $3,000 in the backyard. It's going to cost you another $1,500 to fix the transmission that he messed up. You probably could have just got the whole job done right with the local neighborhood-owned repair facility, legitimate, that's licensed and got certified techs and takes your credit card, and now you have nothing to worry about, and you've spent the same money, and you've gotten more for your money because you have a good warranty, and you've got recourse if there's an issue.
Well, I've heard this bad advice in our industry, and it's, you get a price on a major repair. Well, you need to go shop that out. That is bad advice. I mean, really, if you got a good relationship with a shop and you know them and you trust them, saving money isn't always the most important thing, because if you don't have money to do it right the first time, you're not going to have the money to do it the second time.
Well, that's why I say if you don't have time to do it right, you don't have time to do it twice. In other words, do it over for not doing it right.
For sure. Well, thanks for sharing your Saturday with us to start a relationship with a great shop, bumpertobumperradio.com.